Today I'm primarily a storyteller, and I tell stories about women. I tell stories about women in history and personal stories about women, and that came from being a part of the Washington Women's Arts Center. I first really met women's stories in their artwork at the Washington Women's Arts Center. That's what people were bringing in. I had an opportunity to lobby in support of women artists and what they needed on Capitol Hill. And just it just led me to take chances with standing up to saying things. I had gone back to school in 1968 and as a freshman actually, and I was in college at Dunbarton College as a Holy Cross down off Connecticut Avenue. And my first art history teacher at Dunbarton was a woman named Nancy Cusick. She was a graduate, an MFA from American University. She was so agile at the microphone talking about the art history and bringing out women whenever she got a chance. And Nancy and I became friends. In my senior year, we were sitting for lunch, and she said, "Are you going to the conference at the Corcoran in 2 weeks?" I said, "Well, no, I don't really do things like that." And she said, "You have to do things like that. You said you wanted to be an artist, to be serious about this, Eloise." And I said, "Well, I do. And well, this is where you know that there are no women in the textbooks. There's a whole wild road to get women equally paid attention to in the male favoring art world. You have to be there." And she shamed me into going. And it was the beginning of a change in my life and in what I knew about equal rights for women and how I felt about being an artist. And I've forever been grateful to her. First conference at the Corcoran, which was just thrilling to meet artists from all over the country, artists that we didn't know about. Judy Chicago was there, Miriam Shapiro was there. June Wayne came in from California, and she was wonderful. She stepped on the stage, and she had a presence of somebody that was out to make a difference. And she spoke like somebody that really knew how she could go about it, and she wanted to tell us about it. I remember the night that I first heard about the possibility of the Washington Women's Arts Center. I was at a large meeting at American University down in the basement of the art building, and Mary Garrett, who was a professor of art history at that time at AU, was leading it. She was a new president of the Women's Caucus for Art. And they were going to be putting on a meeting during the College Art Association meeting, and she was begging for people to help her. And I certainly was there to help. I had already told her that I would help. And a woman appeared at the back of the room and waited until it was appropriate, and then she stood up and she said the reason she was there was because she wanted to tell people about something that was happening for women artists in Washington, and it was a new organization, the Washington Women's Arts Center. It would be downtown on Q Street. One night I went down to Q Street by myself for a meeting. And the room was filled. It was a small room. It was filled people. No one that I knew was there. And I sat around and listened, and I was really impressed by a woman named Charlotte Robinson, who was a take charge kind of person. And she was in charge of the exhibitions committee, and she had a lot of things to say that she thought would be good for the center to do. And afterwards, I had heard her say that she needed help, and so I approached her and offered to help her. I knew nothing about exhibitions, but that's the way it was at the center. You didn't have to already know. If you just volunteered, the person you were volunteering for would teach you, would tell you, would help you, and that's what Charlotte did. When Charlotte moved off to other things, I found myself in the position of director of exhibitions, which I was thrilled to do. I now knew how to hang a show, how to set up juries, how to get the show on the road, so to speak. But there was a woman at the Washington Women's Arts Center at that time that really helped me to grow. Joan Mister was her name. And I had become more interested in the politics around equal rights for women artists and things that were happening in New York. And Joan, who always had more ideas than anybody else, I mean, the woman's mind never stopped working. I got involved with a thing called the Coalition of Women's Art Organizations. And they had entrusted on me to meet with people to represent women in the arts looking for equal opportunity. Joan had worked for a senator in Capitol Hill, and she knew the workings of those things. She also was one of the best marketers that I've ever known, and she started and really polished the newsletter and saw this as a vehicle to get the word out about what was happening at the Washington Women's Arts Center. And she agreed that she would help me. I'll never forget the afternoon that she and I went together to see the director of the General Services Administration. And Joan arrived in her jean overalls, and I had on my Dress for Success blue wool suit, and she had on her boots. And we went down there to see Jay Salmon. And we sat in his office, as big as a football field, it seemed to me, and we talked to him so professionally and as though we had such power with all the women that were behind us that he granted us some stuff and said he'd see us again and he would take care of our issues. And then Joan and I went down the hall into the ladies' room and sat and fell down on the floor laughing. It was fabulous. It was successful, but it was a fabulous experience. I really loved being the director of the exhibitions committee. They were wonderful people to work with. And Joan and I put this plan together that we would call some of our shows "I of" whoever was the juror. And in thinking it through, we decided that in order to have that invitation look really important, we had to have a photograph of the juror to put on it. And we didn't have a photographer. I have a camera. And Joan said, well, then obviously you'll be the photographer. So I did that I had no idea I could do it. That was what the Washington Women's Arts Center was all about. And it changed my life. It's as simple as that.